Well, thank you guys again for being here, and we really want to thank the association and Royce for providing lunch for us. We really appreciate that partnership. Thank Debbie. Yes, make sure to thank Debbie. She gets all.
Exactly.
All right, so this, just so you guys are aware, welcome to our Utah Fits All training. This is really low key. It's just meant to answer questions and help you guys figure out where you as charter leaders can fit in Utah. Not changing, this is not, so worry about it and fight about it. We're just going to embrace it and figure out where each school can fit in. Today we have our panel of experts. We have Royce Association. It says here that Royce grew up in Pennsylvania, but he's been skiing, playing, and mountain biking in Utah for more or less 30 years. I think everybody knows Royce's work in the association, but being here today, he's going to kind of next, we have Kim Zaltz. Kim is a wonderful at Canyon Grove Academy. Was born and raised in Australia, but she's lived in Utah more than half of her life now. Kim has already started working on the process of becoming a provider and figuring out how her school policy is going to match what needs to happen with the student. And then last we have, but not least, we have Stephanie Freeman, and Stephanie is the executive director of the A Scholarship, and they are the ones that are managing the scholarship for Utah. So all Stephanie, also I've known. Thank you. One thing I do have, when you guys ask questions, will you please repeat that it is better in the recording? I'm just going to turn a little bit of time over to each of you to
Good to be here. See lots of friends. Yeah, I think what Amy said is really important. This is not a question of whether or not Utah Fits All exists. It exists, and it's going to. I expect it's going to grow. I don't know how big it's going to get. In some states, it's gotten a variation of this has gotten a lot bigger. I don't think Utah is going to grow as much as some of my friends advocating for it, and they really are friends. I've been involved in that effort for most of my career. You've probably all heard me say that when asked what UAPCS's position on Utah Fits All is, I said I've consistently said no one would believe me if I said that we were opposed to it because I have a history. And there are some schools, some of you may have heard that on the member meeting on Monday, who were ready to string me up for not opposing it. But if I said I was for it, they would definitely string me up. So we're officially neutral. That being said, there are a couple of ways to think about this. You can say, yep, these are people that are competing for my students. And frankly, that's real. But it also opens up the opportunity to compete for 10,000 students that right now, and I think the lion's share of those, we'll talk a little bit more about that, but the lion's share of those 10,000 students that got a Utah Fits All scholarship here in the last couple of weeks haven't been attending a public school of any kind. If you look around the country, roughly 2/3 in any when a program starts up, roughly 2/3 of the people that participate were either homeschooling or in private school. Given that the private school community after 2007 tanked because there just weren't very many private schools left, I think that number in Utah is a little bit smaller. I also think that there is a significant, 10,000, and who knows, I don't know where that number is going to stop, but it's not going to be as big as, say, on a percentage basis, as you see in Arizona or in Florida. And part of the reason, maybe the biggest reason for that, is that most of the state is LDS, and most of those LDS people regard the district schools as their LDS school. We've got an Institute of Religion next to virtually every high school in the state. And so there isn't the same religious pull that you feel. I grew up, as Amy noted, in Pennsylvania. And the Catholic school, York Catholic, was pretty prominent. There's a lot of Jewish kids. The Jewish synagogue was across the street from the church that I attended. And that kind of effort is what pushes a lot of people to attend a private school. We don't have the same pressures there. There's some of it, but I don't think it's nearly as substantive. So what this says is, here's an opportunity for the rest of public education to compete for, right now it's 10,000 students. I don't know how that's going to change over time. It will depend entirely on how the economy performs. I didn't listen to the economic summary in committee on Tuesday, so I can't tell you what things look like officially right now. I don't expect us, but in that regard, we have a lot of structures built in that say we're not going to see any decreases in the value of the WPU. There's a lot of structures built in to prevent that. So I think that this will probably grow, but there's a cap somewhere. I'm guessing, don't take this as gospel, but I'm guessing that upper limit is somewhere between 20 and 30,000. People are, that's obviously just the gospel of Royce 4 and 3, and it's probably not worth the time it took to say it. But there are people right now that are out there looking for places. All of these parents that lived through the pandemic know that being a parent and a teacher is hard. And today they have money that they're looking to spend. And so this is an opportunity. I assume that's why all of you are here, to say, that can come in a variety of places. It could be a class during your regular school day. It could be summer. It could be post, after school. It could be before school. But I think in many ways, the bigger opportunity that Utah Fits All offers. I had this conversation with a couple of legislators yesterday. There are very few regulatory strings attached to how students can access and use the dollars. We, on the other hand, have 400 or so rules in addition to 3 separate titles. Aaron gets employed to help all of us follow all of these rules. Some of them are more important than others. But this should be, I hope that all of you turn this into a test case to say, hey, that rule clearly isn't necessary because this student that I'm serving in UFA is getting the same great education, maybe, because then we can come back to the legislature, to the state board, and say, this isn't hypothetical. I've documented what this means. And that's the longer term opportunity for us to say, let's, if you will, balance the equation. The goal isn't to regulate Utah Fits All. It's frankly to deregulate what happens. I mean, there are limits. Some of the federal regs, that's a whole different ball of wax. I don't pretend to know how to change any of that. But there's a lot of silliness that is in the structures of public ed, and that some get cut off every year and others get added, and we need to be consistent and track what we're doing and saying, hey, let's get rid of that. So I'm excited that you are here. My goal isn't for people to participate or not to participate, but to the extent that you see it as an opportunity, we want to help you understand the structures. And my guess is that my panelists probably can tell you more about what that entails. Kim and I have talked a little bit about what it means, but I'll let her carry that ball of wax.
Thank you. Happy to be here. So I think it's important to note that, yes, I'm a supporter of charter schools. So I did homeschool my children. My oldest had some needs that were obvious to me that he needed to be out of the traditional school. And so I went ahead and homeschooled him. He was brilliant mentally, but he had some physical issues that we need to deal with when he was young. And so I started that journey, had no idea what I was getting into because my background was public school, and I actually had a wonderful experience. So there was no reason to do something different, but he was the reason to do something different. And so I did, and started attending just when he was young, homeschool conventions to say, what is it? And is it even possible to do? And as I learned more, I thought maybe this is something I could do. But as we progressed through our schooling in our home, I thought I could do this even with my other kids, but that probably could have a positive experience at the local schools. And ask them often, what do you want to accomplish? And as they got older towards their junior high years and their high school years, these consultations took place often because the resources that we needed weren't in our home. They were outside our home. And there was at one point that my daughter said, I want to go to this local charter school. And I said, okay, let's go over and see if that's an option. It wasn't an option unless she was enrolled at least 3/4 time. And that's not something that we wanted to do. But she did want to take the Chinese class and she wanted to take another class. And I thought, well, that's just too bad, that this isn't an option, that the door was closed because this could have been a great relationship. I was a good parent. I would have been happy to contribute to that school in any way that I could as a parent as well. So that disappointment turned us to the local district school where we could actually dual enroll at that point in our schooling. And she was able to sign up for like a ceramics class or whatever it was that was there, and creative writing, and she enjoyed that. Currently all of my kids have graduated college, and she is now doing her graduate work, and she's in Japan right now doing a project out there. So it was a positive experience experiencing educational choice for our family. And there were a lot of benefits that were there, but I didn't do it alone. I turned to the schools for resources that I needed. I looked at them as partners, as that education in of itself was valuable. And so when I look at Utah Fits All, I look at it from a little bit of that viewpoint or background, that a large percentage of those that are receiving scholarships, as Royce pointed out, are going to be homeschoolers that are not always going to do it alone. They're going to be turning to other schools like we did to the charter schools to say, we would love to take an orchestra class, and you want that. I would think you would want those orchestra students. My kids started music classes at very young ages, like they were 2 and 3 years old when we started music classes, but they were playing college level music by the time they were in junior high and high school. And I wanted them to participate at the high school. So while they did private school after school orchestra program, I also wanted them to participate locally because that's our community. There's some tradition that exists in those neighborhoods that are around us, and I wanted them involved. And so when I think of Utah Fits All, I do believe that a lot of the homeschoolers that are around think about how do we tie to our community, and it's easy for them to turn to those local schools, to the charter schools, and say, we want to come be a part. What can we do to come to your school and participate in whatever interests they have at that point for their individual students? So what is Utah Fits All? Utah Fits All is a scholarship program, $8,000 per student. And we just awarded 10,000 students on May 3rd to receive a scholarship. Now the parents have to decide what they'll do with those $8,000. Now, I have heard people say, $8,000, that's a lot of money, because when you get a WPU, that WPU is not $8,000. But there's other funding, right, that you receive. And so as we talk to the LEAs, one of the things that you have to figure out is, what does it cost to school a child? Right? WPU is just one factor, and Kim knows that, So how much does it really cost to educate this child? That the numbers from when I did research initially, looking into this, and I haven't been in this role for very long because Utah Fits All is a very young program. So hiring of ACE took place in November. So it's a young program, but it's a program based in scholarships from year 2000. So as a company, they know what they're doing. For me, there was a lot of research that I did, and looking at what it costs to educate a child usually runs between, it seemed like $11,000 to just shy of $14,000 in the state of Utah, depending on the district or school that they're attending. It's actually quite expensive to school a child. And so when you look at that, they have $8,000. If they want to come to your charter school, how much will it cost for them to be able to enroll? And will you require them to enroll in some circumstances fully, right? Like maybe Kim's school, or is it something that they can participate in a Chinese class or in something like an orchestra? And what would that look like for you? So it's not necessarily that they're replacing a WPU like they would at a district school, but it's a certain cost that is set for you that you have to decide, are we going to charge the family per credit, or per class? What does that look like? If it's an elementary level, what will that look like? If it's a junior high level, what will that look like? If it's a high school level, what will that look like cost wise? But they're coming to you expecting to be able to see a list of services and courses that would be available and the associated costs that come with that. What does that mean for you to apply, if you want to apply to become a provider? Well, first of all, it's important for you to recognize that, one, you're already pre-approved according to the law. You are not like the other providers that apply for Utah Fits All to become a qualified provider. You are a provider already. They can come to you without you actually even applying. So you don't have to apply. There's some advantages to apply. One of the advantages in applying is how little you have to provide. And the first is it's just your employee identification number, and then a list of the courses that are available and the associated fees. That's what you're asking. Then you agree to the anti-discrimination, right, laws that are there, and you provide your information. You can directly link your bank account to our digital wallet, which we use, Class Wallet. And that way the family can actually directly pay you for the services you provide, if that's something that's convenient for you. If you choose not to apply, but you still want Utah Fits All students to participate, you can give them an invoice and say, this is the invoice, and they can submit the invoice to Utah Fits All. They could pay you, and they could get reimbursed for that invoice directly into their bank account that is associated with that Class Wallet. So there's a lot of reasons that it makes it really easy for you, whether you apply or not. So another advantage to applying is, by applying, you get your name out there and a notification, a description of the services you see. And so when families are looking to say, is this charter school part of the program? They can see you there. And they can say, oh, they are, and here's the courses. And so it's easy for them to be able to see that. So that's essentially what it is. It's the $8,000 that they have. What do they want to take there, and what will you charge for the courses that they're interested in? And the landscape is wide open. Like Roy said, we don't know where this will go growth-wise, but we're starting the program. Initially, it started at 5,000 scholarships, but before we even started, it doubled to 10,000 scholarships. Where will that be? We had over 27,000 students applications that were in, and we have some very disappointed families. We base it on preference, and so the preference level, according to the law, is at the 200% federal poverty level, and less get first preference. The next is the 200 and above to 555. That's a huge area of income for families, and that's where a large group of them come. And then 555 is above, and that's the other category. Next year, it'll look a little bit different because it will add that those that are in the program get to remain in the program. So that's something that's different. And an additional add to that is that siblings will have preference as well. So it will start with those that are in the program, then it will go to the 200% poverty level, and then it will go to siblings, and then it will go to that 200 to 555%, and then to everyone else. So that's what the program looks like. We do anticipate growth over the next year. How much growth, I'm not sure what that will be, but these are individuals that, while there'll be micro schools and co-ops and commonwealths and people that just purely stay at home and homeschool, we've already received feedback saying, how can I get my LEA to sign up as a Utah Fits All provider? Or can I still go to the local school for a class? And that's a common question that's coming in, which indicates to us that they are looking not to do it alone. They're looking to be able to use some of that money to go out and participate. And as I just the other day, I've been talking to different individuals, how we look at that, but there's things to take in consideration. You can simplify things and say, I think this is what Kim did, and she can talk to that, is how much does it take to school as a person and how much can I charge, right? Versus if you want to do things, really simply, are we providing transportation? Because if you do the whole package, it covers the transportation, it covers janitorial, it covers all of the things that normally would cover a student at that small portion of how you're deciding to charge them. If you want to do it in a different way, you could actually say, well, they're not going to use transportation, so we're not going to charge them for that, right? You could actually divide those fees out to say a locker costs this much, a transportation costs this much, to go to these types of extracurricular costs this much. So you could actually provide your own fee schedule in whatever way works for your school and makes sense to you. So that's the Utah Fits All program, and you are all pre-approved.
Okay, great information. Thank you. So my school, I don't know if you all know my school, so I'll explain who I am a little bit. My school is a hybrid model. I've been running hybrid models of education for, I think, 12 years, so quite a bit of time. That means my families call themselves homeschool. And so the population we're talking about is my people. They're my people. So when I heard about the Utah Fits All Scholarship, I, as a mom, was really excited, going, yay, I can get those funds, and now I can educate my children the way I want to educate my children. But as a charter leader, I looked at that and went, oh, wow, what does this mean? And so, so I'm still struggling through oh my gosh, what does this mean? Because I don't know what it's going to mean, especially for my school, relying upon those parents to come to me. So this is where I'm at right now. I had to sit with that morally and go, okay, but what do I really believe? What do I believe? And I believe in families, and I believe families have a right to choose their education the way they wish to choose. So I am constantly pushing my fears aside and doing what I feel is right. And sometimes a little more fearful than others, but I am a little nervous. So currently I notified all my families and let them know, hey, there's this thing called Utah Fits All Scholarship. Very trepidously, I did that, put it out there and said, there's this thing if you want to apply. And I had over 100 families notify me that they were applying for the scholarship. Of those 100 families, I have 50 who have now reached back and said, we have the scholarship. Some of those then left. They left because they didn't need me anymore, is what they felt. And that's okay. That's okay. I'm trying to be okay with that. Okay. That's okay. They have the right to do what they want to do. So that's where I'm at currently. So those are the whys that I did it in the first place, just because I believe in freedom and I believe in families. So as a school, then I had to sit down and look at it and say, okay, well, why do I as a school want to do this? For me, it was every year I hit my enrollment cap and I can't get more kids. And so I've got lots of kids out there who want my school, but I could never provide services for. So this was a way for me to be able to provide those services for students. So I can still hit my enrollment cap, and then I can go over that with the UFA students. So, and I'm over my cap now because I have UFA students that are coming to the school. So because for me, that was an additional fluff on the top. I'm full, I'm meeting all my expenses. I charged a little more than what perhaps, I charged a little less than what perhaps I might have. Because as I look at the funding, elementary level, I get about 8,700 per student is what we figured out. So for me, because I wanted these extra kids and I needed these extra kids to come in and it's that fluff on the top, I charged $6,500 for the program. That's the full Canyon Grove experience. I had families turn around and complain and say, why are you charging so much? That's outlandish. You shouldn't be charging that much. And I know, right? So I've had to educate them on actually what I'm charging and why I'm charging that much. And again, like I said, some stayed, some left because they really don't understand how much their education costs us to do, because these are homeschool families that are used to doing education on a shoestring, and they do really well at doing education on a shoestring. And they're all out there saying, oh my gosh, $8,000, what on earth am I going to spend it on? But there is also tons and tons of chatter out there for families saying, we want to go to our local community school. We want to participate with our local community school. Will you please tell them to sign up and become a vendor because we want their services? So Canyon Grove offers the full Canyon Grove experience, which is a day and a half on campus. And that's why they freak out saying, well, I'm only on campus a day and a half. Why are you charging me so much? But then I run through and explain to them, you have a teacher, you have online instruction, you have all the resources, you have all the curriculum, you have all the pieces. And so I explain it to them and then they start to understand. But I'm looking at that from Canyon Grove's perspective. I'm not offering it for my 5 days a week butts and seats kids because I have limited space. I can only fit 18 kids in each of those classrooms. Those classrooms are full. So I cannot offer the scholarship there, but I can offer the scholarship with the hybrid model because they don't take up seats all day, every day. So I have space. So that's the first thing for me is looking at it saying, okay, do I have space? Can I do this? Why would anybody want to participate in this? And so that's what I looked at for there. Then, was it just last week? Was last week. Last week, I adopted SPA, School of Performing Arts. And so School of Performing Arts is a high school. So now I'm having to look at things from their perspective and say, okay, well, now with the School of Performing Arts, who is their target audience? What kind of students want that program? And it's the same students, right? And so we're starting to break that down and look at that and say, okay, well, if somebody comes in just for a dance class, what is that going to cost? How do we put a cost on those kinds of things? And honestly, that's where I really struggle is how do we all put a cost on these things? When it's like you said, you know, it's all the different pieces that the families don't see and don't understand, but that's what I'm looking at for that, because that I can piecemeal out where they want to come for a dance class or a math class or whatever it is, we can do that. School of Performing Arts is a little different in that their needs are different. They're not at cap, they're not fully enrolled, but they do need additional income. And so for them, in order to provide this, they have room in their classrooms, they need a little addition of income. And so it works for them as well. It just works from a totally different perspective than it does from the Canyon Grove perspective. So hopefully that gives you some thoughts and ideas of how it would work. But I think what would be really fun, Royce, is to gather and kind of come up with some kind of a plan as to what we should charge as schools. I don't know if that's doable or not.
Before you start, Royce, we have Dr. Kramer. He was unable to be here today, but he has joined us by Zoom. And I just would like to give him an opportunity to speak from like the charter leaders perspective and from our office as the authorizers for your schools. Can you hear us okay, Paul?
I can hear you great. Thank you.
Okay,
And
you sound good.
good to be with you, friends, even if it's remote, and to listen and to learn to the panelists. It's really amazing. So picked up something from Jim Gunner. He's the president of National Charter School Institute last week, or it might have been the week before. We were talking about how we are part of a diverse and dynamic educational marketplace. And that's talking about charter schools and Utah Fits All as we work together. And so what does it mean to be diverse? Just breaking that down a little bit. You know, we have brick and mortar schools, we have online, hybrid, as Kim was just talking about, we have other virtual models, classical, STEAM, STEM, we have arts, we have athletic based, we have college prep, vocational prep, schools that are agriculture. I mean, that's just kind of a beginning. We have so much diversity in what we offer as charter schools and dynamic, right? Just to get into that a little bit. Dynamic implies that there's change and that that's positive change. And it's change for the positive for all school students. And that's what we're a part of as we kind of explore working together with Utah Fits All. And I think that that diversity and that dynamic nature comes together as we talk about the educational marketplace. And that would be the choices, the competition, maybe call it healthy competition, right? It's not a blood sport. This is healthy competition for the good of all students. But there's definitely that entrepreneurial spirit, that marketplace, that very nature that there's a per pupil amount of dollars, or there's a $8,000 associated with students. And so I think we ask ourselves, what do families want in the marketplace, and what can schools offer in the marketplace? And they're looking for individualization, customization, and they're probably not looking any longer for a one.
Maybe we lost Dr. Kramer. We'll see if he connects. Times we have hard times. If he comes back, we'll let him finish what he's talking about. But let's just pick that back up about thinking about the cost.
So, frankly, I don't pretend to know. I mean, I've read a lot of financial statements, but all of you are going to approach that question differently. And I would be really surprised if, I mean, it's possible to calculate an average, but an average usually means that both your feet are either too hot or too cold. What it looks like for you is going to, right. The question that I guess I'd like to pose, and really it's for the two of you. Well, I have two questions. You talked, Stephanie, about applying. Is it fair to say that really what you're just saying, asking them to register? It's not as if, because you say they're already permitted. And then for both of you, what, if any, policies do the schools that participate either at the board or, as at the administrative level need to adopt in order to play in this space?
So the first question is that you really only need to register as opposed to apply. I guess that's just semantics there. The fact is that there is a application that's available on the website. And when you select which type of application you will fill out, you choose LEA, and it is a different course of questions and what you provide than other providers have to provide. So yes, it is really just more like a registration because you are pre-approved. And so it's just entering in the information, and then that information is published on our website and available to families. And so that's the advantage to being able to register, right, as a provider for Utah Fits All. But you could still be a provider without even necessarily registering if you want to invoice families in any other way as well. And the second question, because I answered that one, I don't remember it. Do you want to restate it?
The question, and I know Kim and I have talked a little bit about this, but frankly, both of you are going to have some insight here, is what, if any, policies or procedures do schools that are participating need to have? In many ways, Utah Fits All ends up sort of taking the place of what this building does for the rest of public education, because you're evaluating whether or not expenses incurred by the parents are allowable. And some of that is inevitably going to flow through what these schools do. And so the question is, what policies or procedures do they need to work out in order to make this work?
So I appreciate that. So as far as policies are concerned, so Utah Fits All does not enter as an intermediary between a school and a family. Those agreements take place between the school and the family. So we issue the funds based on whether they're approved according to the law. There's 13 categories that are very broad in many ways without much restriction. And if they fall within those expenses are usually easily approved. And so in that way, we're just approving invoices that come in from schools, tuition that has to be paid. Those things are easily approved by Utah Fits All. And so that's what we do. As far as policies are concerned between the schools and the families, one of the things that I think private schools are doing is they're saying, if you have received a Utah Fits All scholarship, and I think this is what Kim has done, then you have to let us know, right, that you have received that scholarship, and you will first pay your tuition or whatever to the school. And so that's an agreement between the family and the institution to be able to decide those types of policies that we as Utah Fits All do not enter into, but that agreement is between them, and to make sure that they're transparent that they've received the scholarship and can make those payments to you. There are some things in the law that states that you cannot require them to stay an entire year. So if they want to withdraw from the program, they can, and then you can prorate that payment back to the ESA account so that they have funds to do wherever they decided to go after they leave. So that is a policy that's, or not a policy, that's in the law, that they have that freedom to move or choose where they want to go if they leave your school. Other policy wise, there's just, again, just those things that are between the school and the families themselves. Same with you have to have a list of courses that are available, as well as a fee schedule that's there, so that those are predictable for the family, and that has to be clear. That usually remains for the year, and those prices could change a following year. It can be changed and updated in your profile that you have with ClassWallet.
Thanks, Stephanie. For me, the only thing that really changes is the funding source. You know, am I getting funding straight from the state for your student, or is it coming through the scholarship? And so for me, that's the only policy that I'm looking at adding to my wonderful list of policies is just how am I going to collect the fees from the families? What does withdrawal look like? Who's responsible for notifying who and what timeline? Those are the only pieces that I'm looking at changing, and what those fee schedules actually are. So pretty simple.
And withdrawal is also mentioned in the law, that there's a time period that the school notifies Utah Fits All as well as the family, so that we make sure that that transaction is smooth and takes place, whether they receive the funds back. There's timelines for everything that's in there, but those are the only policies that are there that in regards to the provider themselves.
The next question I would ask, and again, I know the answer, but I think it's better coming from you. What is the relationship between kids who have an IEP or a 504 and want to use Utah Fits All scholarship at your school? What obligations does Dane have, or does Hanafi have vis-a-vis that IEP for that student?
So when the families sign up for the Utah Fits All scholarship, there are 5 attestations that they sign at the end of it, and 2 of them have to do with IEPs or special education, in which they are opting out of public school provided education resources for their children, and that they understand that there's a difference taking that on their own versus receiving the resources that are in the public schools. And so that's one of the agreements that they make, that when they leave the public system, that they are also leaving behind some of those resources. Obviously, there's certain resources that are still available to them in the law, where they can receive an assessment every 3 years or those types of things. So funding for IEP students would be something that you might want to take in consideration, because when they leave, they're leaving the public funding that normally would come. And we know that the WPU for a special education student is always higher than it is for other students. And so if a family comes to you and they have a special education student, that would be something that you would have to take in consideration fee-wise, okay, cost-wise as well, to be able to recognize that it may actually require more resources, and those would have to be upfront and transparent with that family. But the family is responsible for their own special education needs once they leave the public system. When they come to you with Utah Fits All, they are not entering the public system. They may not have a WPU if they come to you and enroll for 1, 2 courses or even full time. They cannot get that WPU. So they're not double dipping into the system. They are paying with their scholarship. So if there are special education needs, those also need to be taken in consideration in your policies.
I would say those are the questions that I had, but I assume that all of you have a lot of other questions, and so fire away.
Is there a way to know the geographical distribution of the students who receive these scholarships to see if it's even worth it to do, well, I guess in terms of outreach and reaching them, are there direct lists? I know we're on direct lists because we get swamped with vendors and emails. Are these parents? Can you reach out to them directly, or can we find out where they live?
So there's privacy, right, and confidentiality that's there. So there's not a direct list of them. We did put on our website a heat map so that you can actually see who applied at this point. And once we're finished with the appeals, because there's people who believe that they should have the scholarship over someone else, right? And so we're in the appeals process right now. That should end by the end of the month. When we finish all of the scholarship allotments, then there will be a heat map that will actually show you the distribution of where the current scholarships lie. Right now, the heat map that's on the website is a heat map of all 27,000 plus students that applied. And you can see the concentrations. A lot of that's along the Wasatch Front, but it's amazing how that heat map actually has hit all parts of the state. So it's everywhere throughout the state. It's fascinating to look at, to see where they're at. What will be fascinating then, like you said, will be those statistics of where they're actually at and located. I would suspect a lot of them are right here again on the Wasatch Front, especially in some of these areas where we know that they may hit that 200% federal poverty level and less.
The parents also create their own vendor lists, and there is also a vendor list on your website. Yeah, so it's displayed as well.
Parents create their own vendor list.
Oh, parents chatter a lot between each other. And so they've created all sorts of Facebook groups. There's lots and lots of chatter, and each Facebook group has its own vendor list associated with it so that other families know which vendors there are available and which schools are participating. Yeah.
Along the same lines, scholarship lists partial students that will be enrolled in school versus having partial scholarships. Will that information be shared and widely available so we aren't having to tell them, well, you're already enrolled in an LEA somewhere?
Yeah, I appreciate that. So he's asking, are we identifying those that are actually already partly enrolled, right, in an LEA? So in a charter school or a public school, well, probably in a district school, right? And so Utah Fits All, according to the law, has the right to check to see where a child is enrolled. And so we will be checking with USBE on a regular cadence to make sure that students are not enrolled in an LEA. And if there are, then we do a follow-up to see, why they're showing up for enrollment in a public school when they have a Utah Fits All scholarship. So they can't do both. And that's also true with the Carson Smith Opportunity Scholarship, which is new, and the Legacy Carson Smith, which is now retired. There'll be cross checks to make sure that only one scholarship is being used rather than that they're using of various resources. So that one's actually should be fairly easy to check and shouldn't be a challenge. So it's not something that you have to worry about. What you have to worry about that there is no such thing as dual enrollment for a Utah Fits All student. There is for a homeschooler without a scholarship, but not for a Utah Fits All scholarship student.
So that you're not awarding the partial scholarships?
No, the law changed. So this year, on February 29th, right, the 5 29 bill, I think is what it was, if I remember right, went through. It was a cleanup bill. And that changed that we wouldn't do prorated scholarships with LEAs, and instead that they would actually, LEAs could become providers and there would be no proration at all.
Just legislatively, the state board and some of the folks around that were aware of some of the needs to change this. As you can imagine, getting the 50 votes, particularly in the House, was a delicate balance. Once it had gone through, there was zero chance that it was going to go back, which is part of the wisdom that they had in saying, we're going to give a runway to ramp up. What they've seen in other states is that there are always some things that you thought of and you didn't. And so that cleanup bill was built in. They're mostly administrative things, but they're critical for the success of a program. Things that don't start well don't end well. So what was in HB 215 wasn't by any means the full story. The HB 529 this year, again by Representative Perucci, cleaned that up.
Let me make one more note too, and that was one of the new things that occurred on February 29th with the bill, and that was that a Utah Fits All student may not have a seat in the SOEP, so the state online education program. They cannot have a seat. The providers in the SOE program can become providers for Utah Fits All, where the students directly pay with their scholarship, but they cannot use SOEP in any way, because as you probably are aware, the students can sign up for those courses either through their district schools or even independently and be part of that program at any time of the year. And so that's also another cross check that will take place along with the Carson Smith scholarships and with USB enrollment in the LEAs. There'll be also a check with SOEP to make sure that they're not enrolled, but they cannot have a seat. So that's a big thing for them, because sometimes charters do use SOEP.
Hello, we are at an elementary school, and so I see this looking a little bit different for elementary. We do have a pretty extensive after-school program. Could this be used for after-school program classes and things?
So she's asking if it can be used for after-school programs, and that's an absolutely yes. It covers summer camps. It will cover after-school programs. If you go into the law, there's quite a few things that it will cover as long as it's educationally related.
And summer camps after July 1st.
Yes, it only starts July 1st. So this is the beginning year. So they can start saving receipts on July 1st because the funding actually will occur on August 7th. So as far as their class wallet, that's when they'll receive $8,000. So if they start spending on July 1st, they can submit receipts on August 7th to be reimbursed for anything that they've spent between July 1st and August 7th. And then starting on August 7th, they can start directly paying through that ESA account.
One thing I think to note, make sure that people are clear that they can't be students enrolled in school and then attending after school programs. No school, just after school, if that's the route that you want to go.
So Amy's saying that they can't be someone who's enrolled full-time in your school and then go to the after school program. So Utah Fits All scholarship student, it's highly unlikely that they'd be full-time in your school unless you do something, take an approach like Kim is taking with her charter school. A lot of them will take maybe 1 or 2 courses and then maybe do an after school program, depending on, where they decide that they want to put their funds. So, but they would not be enrolled full-time and then do an after school program for sure. They probably wouldn't have the funds to do so. And at that point, this is where families have to make decisions. If they want to be in school full-time in a public school, then they probably won't take the Utah Fits All scholarship, right? And if they want dual enrollment, where the dual enrollment becomes quite high, like my child, was taking AP courses and distance education and doing it in different schools in our district because of some of the classes that she wanted. She was like a full-time student, really. I don't know that the Utah Fits All scholarship would have fit her because she was meeting her needs by taking the classes that were already available in the public school. So that's where families really need to make wise choices of what really works best for them. Would dual enrollment actually work better for them? And that's something that district schools need to look at. For charter schools, that's usually not something that, unless for some of the online programs or things like that, oftentimes you're looking for them to be at least 3/4 time to be able to receive your WPUs. Because and you correct me if I'm wrong, you're not able to take them usually as part-time students in that way. And so this is where I think charter schools are key for Utah Fits All, because it opens that door so that you have that opportunity to be able to bring these families in part-time for the first time ever for many of us.
I know I asked this before. To what other schools on the website that parents have access to?
So he's asking if you have access to be able to see what other schools are charging. You're welcome to go into the website and there's a provider tab. Well, I guess it's not the provider tab. It's actually in the family section. Sorry about that. There's a provider list and you can click on that list. It's currently alphabetical. So you could actually look up a school and be able to open it up and you would be able to see the courses they offer and their associated fees. So that's the way that you'd be able to access that. But again, like Roy said, it's a marketplace, right? And so you'll see variances in prices and what schools will charge. So some may be charging more than another school, and that's something that they can do. We did have some districts that have applied as entire districts because someone asked, do we make this decision, as a charter association or something like that of what we would charge. And there are some districts that have applied as an entire district. So they have a fee schedule. I'm guessing that they're doing by credit hour so that they could do that because that's very uniform and a great approach to take to make it more uniform. I'm not really sure, but it can be done on a higher level if that's something that you're interested in doing. But of course, you can actually do it very individual. And I can't imagine Kim doing it in a uniform way when she has such a unique program. And that's where I think charter schools are also different than district schools. They're very unique. And so you've got to decide what actually works for you.
You mentioned that anytime if students want to withdraw, they can, and has to kind of either allow them to do that and refund. How about the other way? Let's say, a student is in a school and not cooperating or doing or not following the rules. How flexible school is to take them out of the program?
So, right. So he's asking whether there's opportunities for schools to be able to enforce rules that they have with Utah Fits All students. And absolutely right. This is a contract between you and that family. So there should be some sort of contract available that when they sign up for classes, they're agreeing to your school policies. If they don't follow the school's policies, whether they're, excusing themselves in attendance, that doesn't work for you, or if they're unruly or something happens, then you would do what you would normally do with all your other students. And you can suspend them from your program. You are not obligated to keep a student in your program if they're not following your program.
Again, what says that the silence here is what is most valuable. The Utah Fits All says you really get to do what you want to do. And again, your policies are going to look different than your policies in the way you enforce those, rather than having a fixed rule up here that my friends adopt. That will you get to play with that space. And frankly, again, I'll come back to what I said at the beginning. I hope that you look and say, this is what I'm allowed to do over here, and it seems to work. Maybe we ought to look at doing that in a bigger space.
Questions, but I'll start piggyback on his. So if you have a student who is in your program and violates, say, a safe schools requirements for laws. We're talking a lot about policies. I'm trying to figure out what laws would apply. Say they violate a state school policy and you want to exit them from whatever program. Do you still have to give them due process, or can that be an arbitrary decision?
FAPE doesn't apply. They, as one of the attestations, they openly say we know that those rights are available to us. We have opted not to take advantage of those, and we know that those protections don't apply.
You can probably eliminate half my questions. Are.
I'll send you the link. I read the bill this morning again. I don't remember them off the top of my head. Maybe Stephanie has it. She lives this.
I actually don't remember them either off the top of my head. So we're past the application process. I moved that behind and we're moving towards expenses right now. So I have a lot of buckets to think of, but I told you that 2 of them have to do with special education, right? And I actually don't remember the other 3. So I have to look them up. So we'll find them. They're actually in the law and outlined, and that's why they were also in the application at the end.
Yes.
Yes, it is. And so it's 53F 6(4) is the law, Utah code.
Sorry, okay.
53F-6-4 is the Utah fits all.
-604, not 4.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So let me just finish on her question there as far as like policies. If there is a student that isn't following what you follow in the school, you have a right as a school not to have them as a student at your school. Whatever you do disciplinary wise with other students that are enrolled full time in your school, a Utah Fits All student is asking to be at your school. They would be following the same rules that you have at your school. I can imagine any family expecting anything different, and they shouldn't.
Is there anything in the law regarding like a guarantee of service, meaning that the parent doesn't think that they got their money's worth for the service provided, whether it's a course or an experience, whatever it is there any way for the parents to say, we're not going to pay, we don't feel like we got what we deserved, or any processes for that?
So the only thing that's in the law for that, and in Utah Fits All policy, is that's between the family and the school. And so if it enters anything like negotiations or mediation or any of those things, that remains between the family and you. The law doesn't say anything specific to that they would step in.
Based on that, the schools should set that in policies on what that would look like.
You can, like going to the doctor's office or some of the other things, those things that are there. If you use them already for other families, that's an easy thing to grab and have them agree to those things as well.
Our families also pay up front. So we will be invoicing families in July. They'll pay in August before they start.
Is that for all services?
Yes.
And you can decide what that payment cadence may be. So if a family, like for a district school, which maybe is elementary, right, is very different from high school. And so elementary is usually a year-round type experience, where a high schooler can go for a semester course, or I want to even say quarter, but I guess that's not true. So a semester course, and you may want to charge by semester. You can actually choose how you want to charge. You can actually charge quarterly. You can charge up front, like she'll do with her academy, or you can, do it based on a quarterly payment. You can work however you want with the families to choose how that payment would look like.
One of the things that we're probably going to have to get used to is one of the things that you've probably heard me complain about, but having spent as much time as we have in public education, we're sort of used to some ruts. It turns out that those ruts are often even narrower than what existing rule or law allows. And it's a little bit uncomfortable to get outside of those ruts. But when I say we should get into more fights, really what I'm talking about is we should get out of those ruts and say, wow, we can do things. And it's not, and we live in a permissionless world. We can do it. And this, I mean, as a regulatory structure, what you see under Utah Fits All barely exists, which is to say there's a lot of opportunity. It's just up to us to look around and say, yeah, I can go over there. Frankly, if you wanted to charge per day or per week or per month or, those are all options. We tend to think in these discrete units, and there are reasons to think in those discrete units. But for example, if you are thinking, I mean, my sister has her youngest, I think he wants to be an X Games snowboarder. He spent more or less all day, every day this past winter up at Woodward. And he's homeschooling. I can imagine, and I know enough about how much my sister travels. She was asking me yesterday about where she should go in northern Germany, and I didn't have an answer for her here in a couple of weeks. I can imagine that you would say, sure, we would love to have you for this program or this program, but we know you're not going to be there, so I'm going to just charge you for this much. And that's going for that family, that's going to be more attractive than saying, no, there's this fixed cost, and we're only going to, whether you come for a week or a semester, we're going to charge you the same. Because my sister may not be interested in that. But if you charge on a daily or a weekly rate, there are people in the market that may play. And I don't know what the size of that is. That's part of the experimentation. But we've got a lot of flexibility here, and don't be afraid to take advantage of it.
Along those lines, then, when we put in our registration and put those fee schedules in, that does kind of limit what we're able to do. Is that how you said annually we can update those?
Yes, you can annually update your fee schedule. You can also think out of the box. I appreciate actually his comment there. I know as a homeschooler, I was always joyful to the fact that I could go to Disneyland or Grand Canyon when nobody else was there. So I remember being at Mountain Heights Academy. Amy was a teacher for probably more than one of my children at charter school. And I remember drawing a little cartoon like, here's the little chain and ball with my computer that has to follow us if we have to do this. But there was some flexibility where we could actually talk to the teachers and say, hey, we're going to be out of town. You know, can you work with us? And when they would do like, yes, we can work with you. That made us happy, because a lot of our education didn't take place by sitting at home in front of a computer. It actually was going out and learning things in the environment and going places and being able to have that flexibility. So there may be, I agree that when we think of school, we think you're coming in and sitting at a desk at a lot of times, or you're sitting at the computer to complete the work. But what does that look for this Utah Fits All group? And that might actually vary greatly according to what they want. And that's why they seek some of these unique opportunities to be able to say, we really want to do this, but is there some flexibility? And so thinking out of the box, sometimes I think is very, very helpful. Royce asked me, what it was like to work at BYU because of the tangling bureaucracy that can occur in those environments. But I'm a dreamer, so I always like, what can I do? And I would bring it forward. What can I do? What can I build? What can I create? And I think that's a great mindset to have in education, to say, what can we do better? And, what can we do to really meet the needs of every student? So doing things differently isn't a bad thing.
If they're funding on August 7th, is there a timeline where they have to spend all of that? And the second part of that would be then, if we chose to add a class semester or whatever, or are we limited to only adding things once a year?
No, you could actually change it, right? You can actually update your schedule to show additional courses that you have. We're just not looking at jumps, hopefully in fees that they're huge, that there's some sort of consistency that's there. So you can actually add courses. As far as when they can spend their funds, right? So it's a fiscal year. So they start on July 1st where they can start spending their $8,000. That will actually go all the way around till June 30th. So if you do have summer programs or you have after school programs, those are things that they can budget in to make sure that they have the funds to be able to participate. So you can put those on your fee schedules as well. And if they want to do those things during the summer, they can actually plan and, put deposits down or whatever is necessary to be able to participate with you in those ways as well.
Just don't schedule those over my conference because I know y'all want to be at my conference.
All right. Are there any other questions we can answer? 100 we probably don't have time for. Quickly, yes.
So I like what you were saying, Royce, about not getting stuck in the ruts, but I'm wondering what constitutes a rut versus applicable law, well, federal, state, whatever else. And I'm all for anarchy, but at what point do we end on needing to comply with some things or not?
So, couple of thoughts there. In the context of Utah Fits All, there's a big wide plain. We're used to what we've done constitutes the rut. That's what we're used to. But there is an enormous plain of places to play. And there's anti-discrimination provisions in the code that you have to attest as a provider. In the registration process, you'll say, I'm not going to discriminate. Oh, okay, fine. We haven't been doing that before, so there's no big deal. Really, those attestations that you'll make as part of that registration process are nothing new. Beyond that, fraud is about the end of the plane. Other than that, it's a relationship between you and a parent, and this is what they are comfortable with. This is what you're comfortable with. Hanafi's skills are not Dane's skills. That's fine. His relationship is going to look different than Kim's relationship. The services that they provide may be related. They may not. But it's designed to be unregulated.
Can I ask a couple of follow-ups? And then you guys can shut me up whenever you want. But anti-discrimination code would potentially cover 5 words that, and
you affirmatively in the attestation as a parent, you affirmatively say, I am waiving those rights under section 504 or under IDEA. Affirmatively say that. That's been included in every Utah voucher bill for 20 plus years.
so that would waive child find as well?
Yes.
For charter schools, we all have enrollment caps. Would enrolling students on whatever basis go against an enrollment cap, or is it totally separate?
Totally separate. You are this student that has a fits all scholarship is not permitted to generate ADM for you. Ergo, there is no crossover there.
Commingling of funds question. So you're collecting funds from, I didn't mean for that to sound as bad as it is, but you're collecting funds from Utah Fits All Scholarship, and you've got all your regulated funds, including the restricted funds, all assumedly going in the same pot. I'm trying to figure out how that looks in back end. What's the reporting structure?
The code is actually silent on that question.
We treat it as a local funds.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Is the school required to collect data that they collect on existing students, such as vaccinations, custody, documents? Do they have to have I'll leave that there. So vaccinations, custody documents. Okay.
So the only thing that I see in the law for Utah Fits All student is that they have, if they're a homeschool student, home-based is what it's called, and they're homeschooled and they're receiving the scholarship, they have to dismiss themselves from the public school the way that that homeschoolers are supposed to do. And that's something that has sparked conversation apparently amongst homeschoolers, because I'm sure some of them actually don't even know what that means. So, but that's in the law currently in the definitions, that a home-based student who is homeschooled and receives the scholarship has to dismiss themselves to homeschool.
So in that over charters, they would be giving up their spot at the charter school if they wanted to attend on a voucher kind of program basis. They're giving up their spot.
Correct. That is correct.
Follow up on that then are they removed from cohort years for graduation counts? Is there a new exit code for the data that shows that they left for the scholarship so that we aren't held accountable for making sure they graduate?
I'm not sure if that's even being tracked. Do you know?
So I'm 100% certain that that is not in the code, but we could go upstairs and ask Aaron Bruff that question. My guess is the answer to that will be yes. Probably have to talk to Angie and Aaron and say, hey, we need to make sure that flag is included in your in those codes in the SIS system, because you're right, they're no longer part of the public education system at that point, and you're no longer responsible. But you need to exactly.
There is private school and homeschool and
yeah, there's lots we could use, but
I'll go back to my list.
So in your, when you apply, the agreement's there that you're already pre-approved. So it's just based on what you already have. So obviously for a lot of the district schools, that's the case, and it may differ for a charter school, but it's because you're an LEA, the law has already approved you as qualified.
Short
So
answer
all
is
of your
that you can be a
students are.
teacher and me, which is a scary thought, but nonetheless, neither of us has a teaching license.
Right. I know that we could have a million questions. I want to be mindful of people's time. You can stay and ask more questions. But I do want to just thank everybody for coming. I think that this is a conversation that's going to be ongoing and evolving, and we are going to start to think of things. What about this and what about this? But the point being that we need to be a community and help each other figure these things out. We have experts. We have people that we can lean on. There are people at USBE. So moving forward and not letting the questions hang us up, just working to find the solutions. And just thank you so much for being here, and thank you to our panel.
it's for lunch.
Yes, thank you.